This is Zestology, the podcast all about energy, vitality and motivation. I'm Tony Wrighton, recording this introduction at Peterborough train station. Don't ask why. In fact, you can. I just had an idea for the podcast introduction, which is why I'm recording it here. Last night, I recorded the latest in our new series of Zestology Q&A podcasts. I put a Facebook post a few days ago asking for questions, any questions that you wanted to ask about pretty much anything, with me and Dr. Stephen Simpson, who's a Zestology regular. I'm sure you've heard him before, elite performance coach and all-round great guy as well. And so in this podcast, we cover plenty of ground. We talk about walking meditation, which is something that I've been introduced to fairly recently, and I'm enjoying it a lot. We also talk about hay fever. I've actually wanted to do something on Zestology on this for a while, because this is one of the tracking experiments that has worked for me. There's been plenty of tracking that just hasn't really worked out, and I'm very enthusiastic about the idea of tracking, but I'm still kind of trying to crack it. But with hay fever, I have genuinely had massive results in just kind of tweaking a few things. So if you're someone in summer who suffers from seasonal allergies, you will enjoy this podcast. Oh yeah, and we also talk about squatty potties. It's all in this Zestology Q&A with Dr. Steve. Enjoy. Right, we are recording another Zestology Q&A. Dr. Stephen Simpson is in the house. Steve, how are you doing?
Pretty good, thanks, Tony.
Bit of hay fever?
Very slight. How did you notice?
Because we've just been talking about it. But you know, I told you I got rid of my hay fever, which is probably going to sound really annoying right now to you.
You're right, but carry on.
Yeah. I made 2 dietary changes. The main one was taking colostrum tablets every morning throughout the whole hay fever season. Mm-hmm. I started doing that last summer. And I also made sure that I took a loratadine hay fever tablet, just a normal over-the-counter loratadine tablet. And the third thing was I cut down on sugar. And those 3 things, I used to get, I would say, like 9 out of 10 hay fever. And now I get like 0.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
It's really been quite different.
Well, that's good, because there's no sign of hay fever in you today, and it's pretty...
I mean, I've had very itchy eyes a couple of times, but in general, it's been... Because I felt like hay fever was something that could be hacked, because essentially it's the body's inflammatory response, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, I'm going to give you the brand of the colostrum tablets. I'd love you to try it out. Do you get it badly, or...?
Well, I'll tell you what, I used to get it really badly, like 9 out of 10, or sometimes like 10 out of 10. But I changed my diet, and it's very much better. And I don't know whether that's a coincidence or not, but I went gluten-free. I don't really know why, and I don't necessarily recommend it to other people, but I still am gluten-free. And since then, definitely I've had a lot less hay fever.
Well, you know I always take the mickey out of you about being gluten-free, don't you?
Yeah, and being vegetarian.
No, because Steve says he's gluten-free, but he still drinks beer. So it's not quite gluten-free, is it?
Don't be pedantic.
But there are plenty of gluten-free beers.
Are there?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't found any, but...
There's Sol.
Okay.
And loads of others. There are quite a few made out of corn. I don't really drink beer now, so I can't remember which ones are. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it does make sense. If it's the body's inflammatory response going haywire when we get hay fever, then perhaps we could change that by changing our diet.
Yes, and we don't want to change it too much. I mean, just remember why we have an immune system, and that is there to mop up all these cancer cells and viruses and all the other stuff we have going around. I mean, they're basically, hay fever is really the immune system doing its job. The mistake it's made, it's identified what presumably is a harmless pollen and thinks it's a threat. So it's just been a little bit misguided.
Well, that is a really good explanation, and makes me feel good about the fact that I'm gloating a little bit about having kicked hay fever out. Well, thanks so much for doing this. Another Zestology Q&A, which was great fun last time. Really enjoyed it.
No, we always enjoy these, don't we? Yeah.
And we're sitting in my flat at the moment. It's a roasting hot summer's day. Yeah. We've got Rob in the background reading my new books on keto.
Got some good recipes here.
Oh, good, excellent, good. Sitting very quietly and obediently in the background. And I posted on Facebook.
He's saving himself for later.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that reminds me, actually. I've got some low sulphur biodynamic wine in the fridge. It's red wine, but I thought it could be quite nice to chill it on this day. Do you want a glass now?
No. I mean, first of all, I don't drink red wine. I don't know why. But I have very few rules in my life, as you know. But one of them is, when there's an open mic in front of me, I don't drink alcohol.
Okay, that's a good rule.
Yeah, I've tried it twice, it didn't work.
When was that?
A long time ago.
Okay, yeah, that's probably a good move.
Yeah.
Well, so far this podcast has been entirely about booze. Let's try and move it on to something a little bit more sensible.
We need to raise the tone a bit, Tony.
I posted on Facebook yesterday asking for some questions. We've had absolutely loads of suggested topics and questions. And we've actually had 734 likes on the post that I put on yesterday. That's nice, isn't it?
That's incredible.
Yeah. Let's start by talking about Manuela, who is an astrology and numerology expert, and commented on Facebook and said, can we use NLP on ourselves? How exactly? So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. That's the thing that you and I both trained in. Mm-hmm. It's provided the basis for a lot of kind of the work that I've done in the books that I wrote, when I kind of took NLP techniques which can be quite dense and tried to make them very simple. And you've used it a lot, and you use it a lot with clients now, don't you?
I do. I mean, it's obviously not the only thing I use, but it definitely has its place, yeah.
So Manuela asks, can we use it on ourselves? What do you say to Manuela?
Simple, yes.
Next question.
No, I'm sure you want a bit more than that, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, we were told, Tony, that when you do the practitioner course, which is like the entry-level thing, you can start to fix yourself or improve yourself. When you go on to be a master practitioner, you can start to help other people. And then when you become a trainer, you can obviously train people in the NLP techniques. So even after your first course, there's definitely some things that you can do to help yourself. And what I remember from those days is we did quite a lot of training about the precision of language and how language is encoded in the brain and the kind of words that can have a very resonant effect within us. So the first tip I'd give anybody is be careful about what you say about yourself, because so many people are self-critical. Sometimes they do it from modesty, but very often they do it from reality. You know, they're just beating themselves up in life. And I don't find that very helpful, and I recommend my clients don't, because things that have happened in the past that we regret or we wish we'd done better, it's history. We have to move on. And if we're going to be carrying that negative baggage with us, it's not going to allow us to tackle the next challenge, you know, full of positivity and confidence as we should be.
So that would be, I mean, I'm just thinking in practical terms for someone listening, that is someone saying to themselves, I'm not very good at that. Yeah. Or life is, this always happens to me, for example, that kind of thing, that kind of negative self-talk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very easy to kind of say, all you need to do is kind of think positively and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
But you're absolutely right. If you think negatively so much, you start to manifest that negativity, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And I mean, in my life, I try never to say anything bad about myself, anything critical. I mean, in front of other people. Now, if I'm with a friend and we're having an open discussion, I'll say, yeah, you know, these are things that I wish I'd done better. But it's never in a negative sense. It's always like part of learning. I mean, we're all on a journey. And the truth is, as I tell my clients, we learn more when things go wrong, when we make mistakes, than when things go right. The default state for the human being, in my humble opinion, is to be confident. I mean, look at kids, young kids, before the adults start to get to them. They're full of confidence when they're playing. So I think that's the default state. So we don't have to do anything to be positive, to be confident. We just have to stop doing the stuff that gets in the way of that.
Yeah. And expressing those goals in the positive and expressing what you want to achieve in the positive as well. I mean, you know, certainly for me, the reason I got into NLP was actually for purely selfish reasons. As it's turned out, it's been quite a big part of my career, but I went through a phase of just not feeling as happy as I had done. And you know, I was basically consulting Dr. Google, as you do, to try and work out why that was, and NLP seemed like something that might be interested, and that's why I got into it. And I think a combination of things like setting goals for myself and writing them in the positive and putting a date on them and being very specific about how I wanted to achieve them, using affirmations, And also the hypnosis element actually really helped me.
Definitely.
Just being someone who lived life at 1,000,000 miles an hour, being able to step back every once in a while and just chill out a little bit, which hypnosis helped me to do. And that's something we'll come on to for another question in a second, whether you call it hypnosis or meditation or prayer or just going for a quiet walk or silence. Actually, all these states are what you might call altered states that can help a person to relax and get into a different frame of mind.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's good. Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. I haven't heard that one about NLP in terms of practitioner. You use the techniques on yourself. Master practitioner, you start to use them on other people. If people are interested in NLP, you can become a practitioner very quickly. And I had to stop myself the other day, become a bit of a snob, because I was with a friend and I hadn't seen her for a while, and she said, "Oh, Tony, I haven't seen you since I've done a practitioner course." And I was like, "Brilliant, you told me about it." And it was 6 days long. Well, when I did my practitioner course, it took 6 months. It was a series of 4-day weekends over 6 months, about 20 days training in total, but it took over 6 months. So I had to stop myself being a bit of a snob about kind of thinking or saying, "Oh, well, maybe you haven't really done the work by just doing it in 6 days." Because actually, I think anything that kind of empowers people and interests people in these techniques, that's absolutely fine. And the true test, as you and I both know, is not whether you can call yourself a practitioner or not, but whether you can use these techniques effectively on yourself and other people.
Yeah. While you were talking, you just crystallized some of my own thinking. The most valuable thing that I got from NLP, and which other people can get, is understanding the power of your unconscious mind and understanding that there are ways you can hack into it. And, once you can start to do that, then things really do change in your life. And I'm sure, Tony, you would agree with that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Do you know what? I got sent a quote today that I think is quite relevant. And I'm going to tell you what that quote is, because I think it is relevant to what you just said. And it's Sam Harris, the famous American controversial philosopher, who said, "In the East, especially in contemplative traditions like those of Buddhism, being distracted by thought is understood to be the very wellspring of human suffering."
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite good. And training the unconscious mind and learning to not necessarily tame it, but by direct it in the direction you want it to go, is massively helpful in stopping yourself being distracted by thought.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Good. Okay, well, thank you very much for your question, Manuela. Now, the next one is from, we are going to veer from the sublime to the ridiculous, my friend Ruth, who was keen to talk about squatty potties. So I interviewed what in kind of technical parlance might be called a digestive expert, what you might say in colloquialism would be called a poo expert. I interviewed her a while back.
You're getting a bit off my specialist area.
Yeah, I know, but it's all right, because you're a doctor as well, so I think we can talk about these things.
Okay, all right. Hope nobody's having their breakfast.
And Ruth said to me, ever since I listened to that, I've completely changed the way that I go to the loo. Because I put a little kind of ledge in front of the loo and put my feet up on the ledge. So you're kind of squatting more, because this is how the cavemen used to do. They used to squat. They didn't have the luxury of a porcelain toilet sitting in the field. They would squat.
Yeah.
So now they sell these things called a squatty potty. It is their slogan is "Squatty potty. Start squatting for the best poop of your life." And it's quite popular. I have a friend, Luke, in the States, who's got one, and you can just slot it under the loo and then lift your legs. Have you ever done this?
No, I haven't.
Well, I think it's important, Steve, for digestive benefits.
Yes, I'm sure.
For me, I guess there's not really that much of a question to answer here. But for me, buying a squatty potty is just a step too far, because if the neighbours come round for a drink and they're like, "What's that weird kind of ledge around your toilet?" But if you've got a little bin in the loo, you can just drag over. You can just rest your legs on that.
Well, being serious, whenever I'm asked, I'm a medical doctor, but I'm fascinated by biology and the animal kingdom and everything. And when anybody asks me a question, I always think, well, what do animals do? Or what do human beings do when, they don't live in the civilized Western world that we're used to? How do, they live the way people were supposed to live? And they certainly don't have what we call toilets, and they definitely would adopt that squatting pose. And, you see this in Africa and Asia all the time.
There's actually something about that. I mean, if you look into it, and people who are listening to this who want to delve further, you're very welcome to Google it. Without being too technical, because I clearly don't really know what I'm talking about, it actually is not very good for the colon and the stomach to sit on a seat when you're going to the loo. We're meant to squat. That's the way we're meant to be.
Yeah.
And trust me, it's just much easier to get things out when your legs are up a bit.
Well, Tony, the lengths you go to for your listeners.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Can we move on?
Okay, so that's the kind of tone of Zestology Q&A, I think. We've set the tone low and we can only go up from here.
Yeah. Well, it's a good question anyway, I think. Perhaps...
Yeah, perhaps we just needed an expert to answer it. Now, Mira Salama says, could you please recommend videos or audio for guided meditation? I find myself struggling to settle down for meditation and quieten my mind. So any tips on that, please? So shall I go first on this one?
Yeah.
Because I did that 40 Years of Zen course that we've spoken about on this podcast. I did that in January, and that was a week of meditation in the mountains outside Seattle with electrodes attached to my head. So I had plenty of time to think about different types of meditation. And in fact, at the start of the week, they said, what we'll do is we'll introduce you to loads of different types of meditation, and you can test them out. And because you've got electrodes attached to your head, we'll show you on a graph which ones drop you deepest into alpha states. In other words, which ones help you to meditate the deepest, which is brilliant. And then more recently, I went to see Sharon Salzberg, who's a celebrated meditation teacher, and I did her day's meditation course in London. It was actually last weekend in North London. And I was really heartened by that, because I have found when I use a type of meditation, it works incredibly for a few weeks or a few months. And then it just doesn't work as well, and I find myself getting more distracted easier. And I can never quite decide if one type is better than the other types, or I should be doing one type or another type. And when I went to Sharon's course, she was just talking about how she loves all these different types of meditation. And in fact, we spent half an hour, 140 people, we all went out into this field outside this place where the meditation course was being held. And we just did a silent walking meditation for half an hour. It was actually amazing. It looked like 140 zombies walking around the field. We were all repeating a couple of mantras and just walking very slowly. And it was so powerful, because I felt almost for the first time this summer, I'd noticed so much about summer that I hadn't noticed before. The difference in temperature when the clouds drifted across the sun and when the sun came out again, and the light kind of mizzle of rain when it started very briefly drizzling, and then the kind of the rustle of the trees and how loud it was. It was just so fantastic to notice all these things, just because I'd given myself half an hour to kind of walk around and do a walking meditation. So I felt like she gave me the confidence to use more than one type of meditation, and to feel that that's okay. And two types that I think are excellent are, firstly, having some kind of mantra, and it could be any word, but just focusing on the breath while you're using this mantra, and any time that you drift away from that, coming back again to the mantra. So you've always got something to focus on, and by occupying the mind enough, you start to relax. And the second type that I've found is very helpful, which is the type that they taught me at 40 Years of Zen, is called detached observer. So you take the part of a detached observer, you shut your eyes, start chilling out, and you're in a detached observer way, just observing what goes on in the brain when you start to relax. And you start to think about, I don't know, I forgot to put the washing in again today. And then you tell yourself, this too shall pass, or that too shall pass. And then you might think, I'm meeting Stephen, recording a podcast later on tonight. And then you just let that drift away. This too shall pass. If you're just focusing, it brings a heightened state of awareness to what's going on in the brain. And again, those are two different types of meditation that you could probably Google. But I was quite heartened by the fact there's more than one way to skin a cat. And Sharon Salzberg was saying, you tried different methods, and one of them might stick, or you might do lots of different ones at once. And I hope that in some ways, Mira, has answered your question.
Yeah, I'm sure it has.
What about you? I know, are you still doing the 5-minute heart math thing in the morning?
No, I'm not. The last few months I haven't been doing it because, like you, I'm always exploring new ways of getting into our unconscious mind, and I've been meditating for many years. But I agree with you, there are so many different ways to do it, and I think I got bored of the mantras and stuff. I definitely make sure I go for a walk every day, and I've learned how to empty my mind. I mean, again, a variation of your final comment. I think you said you become aware of a thought, the observer effect or something you said. And I do a similar thing. If I notice a thought, I think, okay, well, I'm not quite sure where that came from, but it's not important, let it go. So I think as long as your mind is still and calm, that's as good a definition of being in a meditative state. But there are as you say, there are so many ways we can get there.
So you did the heart math stuff for ages, didn't you?
I did,
in the morning.
Time. Yeah, about 5 years probably.
And you'd put a pulse monitor on your ear, and you would do the breath work with it, and it kind of gives you signals, doesn't it? It gives you colours and it gives you signals, and you get audio responses as well.
You do, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm amazed that you're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I am as well, but I just haven't found it necessary. I've started to embrace a couple of new philosophies, and I've definitely, fingers crossed, got a pretty good handle on stress and things like that. Yeah. So I'm probably more relaxed now than I've ever been. And it's great to just, when something works, that's great, until you find something else that works better. Yeah. What are the new philosophies? Well, they're not new, but I mean, I've been, I don't know quite how I got into this, but I've been doing a lot of research on Carl Jung, and I've been writing some blogs and making some videos about that. And the deeper I delve into Jung and his written stuff is not easy. I mean, of course, it's all been translated from German, which doesn't help. But some of his core concepts have blown me away. I mean, particularly his views about the collective unconscious. And, that's a subject in itself. But in essence, I think what he's trying to say is that our unconscious mind is so powerful that it is actually connected to the unconscious minds of pretty much everybody. I mean, we're all connected on some level through our unconscious thinking or energy waves or something. And this is not a kind of a unique thought. And if you can embrace that as being possibly true, nobody will ever prove it, but if you think it's possible, then it does mean that there's a huge amount of support available for anybody at any time. By everyone. By everyone. I mean, as people have said, you can stand on the shoulders of giants. And, of course, this is the basis of quite a lot of philosophies and religions. I suppose a word for it is faith. But once you start believing that indeed you've got a vastly more powerful unconscious mind than you recognise, that will help you in any situation as long as you allow it to, as long as you can slow down that chatter which comes from the small bit of our brain we call the conscious mind. So I've been playing with that. So I'm imagining you in your study Googling Carl Jung and finding all these incredible deep rabbit holes to dive down and spend hours reading about him. It's quite interesting. He was the one, and I think this is very relevant in terms of, because his output was prodigious, wasn't it? It was. Didn't he lock himself away every summer and not talk to anyone for a few months while he wrote stuff? It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, I'm sure he had some retreat by a lake, and he would just go and spend. Obviously, no internet, no connection, no telephones, anything else. He'd spend a few months there writing, and he'd come out and he'd have another philosophical masterpiece which would stand the test of decades of time. Yeah. And I got into Carl Jung really through my interest in the work of Einstein, because Einstein is known as a scientist, Nobel-winning scientist, but actually if he was alive now he would be regarded as one of the top self-development coaches in the world probably. A lot of what he said are the kind of things that you and I have learned and heard from other people. And it's a blueprint for life. So what other changes have you made? I notice you're not wearing your chakra beads anymore. That's because I forgot. I've been really busy today. I normally do. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm still a fan of chakras.
Now, question from my mate Rob, who wants to ask you about poker, because obviously one of the things you do is you're an elite performance coach and you work with people in, well, all different fields really, don't you? But you work with quite a few poker players. And we've spoken before about poker on this podcast, and I've loved hearing your poker stories. But this, in the last couple of weeks, one of your guys has done something very special. So he won a bracelet, which is like one of the biggest things you can win in poker, isn't it? So tell us a little bit more.
Well, right now it's the World Series of Poker. This time every year, lasts about 6 weeks, and all of the top poker players from the world meet in Las Vegas and play a lot of tournaments.
And you work with players to get them into a right mental headspace for tournaments, but also get themselves into a good headspace for life in general as well.
Yeah. In fact, you could probably put it the other way around. I mean, I work, all the people I work with, including myself, get your head in the right place, and then pretty much everything else will follow. Whether it's poker, or you're a professional golfer, or you're a business person, or you're a person who just wants to have more fulfilling relationships, whatever.
It's so true, isn't it? And I notice the real nuances and subtleties when my head's in the wrong place. Like, for example, this morning, I didn't have time for a proper meditate, which I normally do. And I found myself getting really angry at a driver who cut me up on the way to work earlier on.
Oh, Tony.
Yeah, like real rage. So yes, small things can make a huge difference to our kind of headspace.
Yeah.
And what was the specific, because obviously we've talked about Chris Moorman before,
yeah.
But what happened, because you have been working with him right before this tournament, haven't you?
I have been working with him since February 2014. Yeah. And I mean, we got off to the dream start because he'd never won a major tournament before, and 2 weeks after we started working together, he did. And as I say, we've been together ever since. Now, of course, he's never won an event at the World Series. And in fact, last year, I didn't know this, but I found an old interview he did. He was so frustrated, I suppose. He said he wasn't sure he would come to another World Series, or else he was going to go into some minor competitions instead. He'd almost, I think, given up. Well, nobody ever gives up, but he was frustrated by the fact that I think he'd been going every year for 10 years or something and didn't really have much to show for it.
But of course, as you've told me before, with poker, the best players only win 15% of the time, right? Because it's so much about the cards.
15% of the time they get into the money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then even less chance of
winning. Yeah.
It's very different from, say, tennis, where if you're Roger Federer or Nadal or Murray, you tend to win all the big tournaments. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened with this tournament?
Well, we took a different approach, and we decided that we were going to schedule a weekly telephone call while the World Series was going on. Normally, you know, if everything's going fine with Chris, I may not hear from him for several weeks at a time. But we said, even if things are going to go well, we're going to talk every week. And a couple of weeks ago, and in fact, his head has been in a really good place for the whole tournament, and there's another 2 weeks to go. And a couple of weeks ago, again, I told him the same thing, and he said, there's one thing that's on my mind at the moment. And I said, okay, tell me about it. Now, before I tell you what that is, his latest book is shortly, in a matter of days, is going to be released. It's his second book about poker. The first half of the book is an autobiography, his life really so far, and the second half is more technical stuff about poker. And he asked me to proofread the autobiographical bit, and I was flying somewhere, and there were two occasions when I just burst out laughing. The funniest stories I've ever heard. Yeah. Now, one of them was he's from England, and he went to university in England to study economics, and he was doing pretty well at university, and he got through to the final term, the final semester, before his final exam, and he had to write a dissertation, 10,000 words or something like that. Chris does not like that kind of discipline. It's not in his nature. And he was also, by that time, playing quite a bit of online poker. And he came to the decision that he wasn't going to do the dissertation. So, not surprisingly, they didn't award him his degree. Now, the dare I say it, Chris, the mistake he made was that he decided he wouldn't tell his parents, because he thought that they might forget about it. So a few weeks later, his parents were saying, we're really looking forward to coming to the graduation ceremony and seeing you get your degree. And he was lost for words for a couple of seconds, and he said, well, sorry, I forgot to tell you. I did pass, but I got the bottom grade. In the UK, it's called a 2-2, I think. And he said, and I'm just, I'd feel nothing to celebrate, and so I told them I'm not going to the degree ceremony. So his parents were bitterly disappointed by this. And then, they rallied and said, well, at least we can hang your degree certificate on the wall. And he thought again for a couple of seconds. And he said, yes, I suppose you could do that if you really wanted to. And then he went away and he had a little think about this. And he had two options. He could go back and tell the truth. But it just once you start telling little fibs, little lies, you never stop. Yeah. So he thought the way out of this was actually to forge his degree certificate.
Oh, God.
This is all in his book. His book is incredibly candid, and it's, as I say, it's a funny read, even if you don't know anything about poker. But anyway, when I was on this phone call with him, this was what was on his mind, because he still hasn't told his parents. And I thought, okay, and the book was coming out any time soon, and they were going to read it. And I said, okay, Chris, well, I don't really want you going to a poker table thinking about things like that. And then I had this inspiration that came from nowhere, and I started laughing. And he said, what are you laughing about, Steve? I said, I've just got the solution. And he said, what's that? I said, what you've got to do, this tournament that you starting tonight, you have to win it. Because then you can phone your parents and say, hey, I've got some great news, and tell them that you've won your first event at the World Series. You have that coveted gold bracelet. And then, while they're so excited, you can slip under the radar. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you the fact that I didn't pass my degree. And he started laughing. And we just said, he said something like, well, that's it then, isn't it? And you won't guess. You will guess what happened next, won't you?
And then he won it.
He won it. He won his first event. And actually, he's done pretty well throughout the World Series. So, I don't know whether it had anything to do with our plan of speaking on the phone every week. Who knows? But the fact is, he's probably, I think he's had his best world. Well, he has, definitely.
And it sounds like one of the interesting things is often we put more emphasis on our personal development, for example, when things are going badly.
Yeah.
When things are going well, we don't necessarily focus on how to take it to the next level.
Right.
Which is what you've been doing with Chris.
Yeah.
For once in his life, things are going, well, not for once in his life, but in the past, he'd get in touch with you, which often happens with coaches in any sport, for example, when the results have dried up.
Exactly.
But he's going well, and he's still, now how can I get to the next level? And the exciting thing is, now he's won one of these, and he's still working with you. He could win another or win something else.
He could. It wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me. But one of the things that, generally speaking, we don't do is we don't look into the future at all. I mean, he's actually pretty high in the Player of the Year. And if he gets some good results, he could end up as Player of the Year. But we are deliberately not talking about that. We're just going to focus, Chris is going to focus just on playing the events, giving every hand his focus, and just literally taking it one hand at a time. And we're not worried, we don't think about, is he going to win another event, is he going to win Player of the Year? We just don't.
I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Now, I've been mulling a new feature on Zestology. In fact, a new weekly podcast called New Stuff Friday, working title. Not quite sure if that's what it's going to be. But I quite like, in the kind of health, biohacking, personal development, self-improvement world, there's plenty and an increasing amount of gadgets, supplements, technologies, different kind of foodstuffs, products that you can try out that can give you a bit of a physical or mental boost. I thought it'd be quite fun to do a podcast every Friday, which is just about 5 or 10 minutes long, and just kind of tries this stuff out, whatever it might be. If anyone's listening to this and thinks that's a good or not good idea, I would love to hear from you, because I think this could be quite fun. And I also think it'd be quite a good way to blag some free stuff as well. No, I don't mean that. I mean, I kind of do. But I think it could work quite well. So I thought it'd be quite interesting for us to talk about some of the new stuff that we've been looking at. I had a couple of things in mind. I wanted to ask you, actually, we didn't mention this before, but when you and I last met, you were telling me about a new technique you've got, which sounded crazy for me, and I thought this would be good for New Stuff Friday. It's a technique where when you're public speaking now, and you make loads of speeches, don't you, all around London and abroad, and you now don't prepare at all. Is that?
That's largely correct. I mean, I do a little bit of preparation, but it's minimal.
Yeah. And for me, I just do not feel comfortable unless I've covered every eventuality. I've got notes, and then I've reduced that into a little post-it note, and I've gotten myself into the right headspace, and I've done 3.5 hours of meditation in the morning, whatever it might be. And I was amazed to hear that you are kind of almost trusting your unconscious mind to deliver it right.
It's not almost trusting, Tony. It is trusting. Yeah, that's what it is.
So where did this come from?
Well, it came from, it was a spin-off from, Carl Jung's view of the collective unconscious, and another philosophy which is very closely related is Sydney Banks's 3 Principles, and I've been exploring that one. And that's really why I do not prepare my presentations and things. I show up early. You can, very early. I'm usually the first person there, and you could say that's preparation. But I just want to make sure that I know how the room works and, do the sound checks and all that kind of thing. It just makes me, and I just sink into the atmosphere, and it relaxes me. But the main thing is, I have this belief that when I get on that stage, there is this collective unconscious, call it whatever you want, this universal wisdom that I can tap into. And if I try and overthink stuff, that's actually going to stop me from getting into that place. But it is, as some people have said, it is a leap of faith.
It really
especially
is.
the first time you do it. In fact, funnily enough, I've actually been doing a blog the last 2 days. In fact, I posted it today on this very subject.
Okay, have you published it?
Yes, it's out
because
there right now.
I'm doing a presentation this weekend at this festival I'm going to down in Somerset, and I haven't thought about it at all yet. So maybe, this will save me loads of prep time. I'll read your blog, and then I won't do any prep, and I'll stand up on Sunday and I'll see what happens.
Yeah. Now, you see, I can understand, but by the way, until at least, it's only the last year I felt like this. Before that, I was very much the same as you. A perfectionist, attention to detail, all of this kind of planning stuff. And so it's a very different Steve.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is on New Stuff Friday. This hasn't been if we were going to do New Stuff Friday, we would say you've been using Carl Jung's collective consciousness theory. Is that right?
Collective unconscious theory.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've got a couple of things that I've been using.
Good.
The first is, I've been doing the keto diet. Did I tell you about this?
I didn't.
Ketosis diet.
You didn't tell me.
It's hard work.
I've heard about it.
And I want to get a ketosis expert on the podcast. But essentially, by the way, if you can hear cracking in the background, that is because I've got glass windows in my flat, and they tend to crack when they get hot.
They're not going to explode.
Well,
are they?
I hope not. It's been doing that for the last 10 years. So I think
your flat is very close to the Shard. Are we going to get shards of glass?
I'm hoping we'll be all right. The keto diet is essentially you get most of your nutrition and your calories from fat. You have a moderate amount of protein, loads of veggies, and very few carbs. And when I say very few carbs, you've got to be so careful about everything. It is quite hard work, I must say. And I've been doing it, it's actually a great way. I've definitely toned up. It's a great way to kind of shred fat and kind of build a bit of muscle, I think. But that's not the reason I'm doing it. I'm doing it for inflammation, also to have a sharper brain. I must say, the last couple of weeks when I've been at Sky, I've felt extraordinarily sharp, which has been very nice.
Good.
Definitely had ups and downs in terms of actually not being able to eat any carbs. But I bought this thing called a ketonics meter, which you blow into. And that's been quite a help because it can tell you when you're in ketosis and when you're not. So when I went to my mate Kev's barbecue a couple of weeks ago, and we had he had chocolate ice cream there, and of course that is not on the ketosis thing. And I thought, I'll just have a bite of it. I'll just have one little spoonful. And honestly, it was like the floodgates had opened. Once I had one spoonful, I was just shoveling it into my mouth because it tasted so good, because I hadn't had any sugar or carbs for a couple of weeks. So then the ketonics meter definitely told me that I wasn't in ketosis after that. I feel with New Stuff Friday, we need like a kind of Zest scale out of 5 or something to rate these new discoveries. I'll work on that bit.
Okay.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about, which I have briefly mentioned on the podcast before, but people keep asking me about it, so I thought in a kind of new stuff section it would work well, and that is my Berkey water filter that I've got over there.
Yeah, that's
which
good.
You're considering getting one, aren't you?
I am, definitely. Yes, you've sold it to me. Have you seen, I mean, the pure water is so important. Our bodies are, what is it, 70% water or more?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, especially in places like London, the water we get out of the tap is full of all kinds of chemicals and toxins.
And people say, oh, tap water's fine. And yeah, it's not going to kill you with one sip. And yet, when you smell it, you can smell the chlorine in it, can't you? And chlorine isn't that good for you. You wouldn't go and drink the swimming pool water, would you? One of the great things about these Berkey water filters is what you want is a filter that takes all the bad stuff out but keeps all the good stuff and all the minerals in the water in. Now, a lot of these reverse osmosis filters, I've done a lot of water filter research, as you can tell. A lot of these reverse osmosis water filters, they fit under the tap, and they give you this kind of bland, neutralised water that doesn't have anything in it.
Exactly.
And actually, that can wash you out of all the minerals that you really need.
Yeah.
Berkey publish all their mineral content, the exact specifications of the water that comes out of the Berkey water filter. And I actually emailed them and I said, I've got a supplementary question. And I said, do you take out chlorine, ammonia and chloramine? Just because I was interested in those 3 things being taken out of water. And they emailed back and said, funny you should ask that. Yes, we do. And here's some of the research we've just done on that as well. So they're brilliant. And what it is it's 2 kind of tanks on top of each other, and you fill up the top tank and then it kind of drips into the bottom tank. And it's the one I've got there is the travel filter, which is the smallest one. And it's fine for me. I'd say for 2 or more people, you might want to get the size up, but that'd probably be fine as well. But it's great, and it feels like it's eco-friendly as well.
Yep.
I mean, I think there's a lot of police sirens tonight, aren't there? Everything's all right.
Yeah, they're coming looking for you, Tony.
Yeah.
Did you pay that parking ticket?
Yeah. Oh God, don't talk to me about them. Are you going to get one then? The Berkey?
Yeah.
It's my favourite gadget at the moment. As I've been telling my friends, I'm marginally more proud of that than I am of my new car. It's just a great gadget, because it's very clever the way it works, and it's very simple. And technically, you could, that's the travel one. You could empty it out, put it in the car. I'm going camping next week. I could take it with me as well.
You could.
So there you go. New Stuff Friday. What do you think? Is that going to be a good feature?
I think it is. Yeah.
Excellent stuff. Steve, thank you as always for recording this. Not a normal one. I don't think we'll do a book and a tip at the end of this, as it's a Q&A rather than a normal Zestology.
Okay.
But unless you've got anything that you've been reading recently which you've enjoyed.
Well, this is the question about the book, and I always forget it. And when you ask me a book, my mind just goes blank. It's the only bit of the interview that I don't like.
Good. So you haven't prepared for it?
No, I have this time.
Oh, you have? Oh, right, okay. Well, then go on. We'll have a book then.
I'm a slow learner, but I get there.
Yeah. What's your book recommendation?
I'm hoping it's not one I've mentioned before, but you and I have talked about it before, and it's The Rise of Superman.
Oh, we have. Yeah, because I'm reading another book by him.
Yeah.
At the moment, Stephen Kotler.
Mm-hmm. That's the man.
And it's all about athletic performance and altered states.
Yeah. And well, it's about extreme sports. We don't recommend them because they really are extreme, but it just shows how these people are smashing the records, not every year, but every single day. It was Liv Bory, the poker player. She recommended this book, and it had an effect on me. I mean, really, it made me get out of my comfort zone. I think all of us who've got comfortable lives, which is very nice to have a comfortable life, but sometimes we do have to get on the edge just to remind ourselves what it's like.
And everyone who has told me about that book has given me rave reviews, including you. And I'm reading another book by him called Stealing Fire at the moment, which I think I heard Duncan Trussell and Aubrey Marcus talking about on their podcast. I mean, this is brilliant as well, Stealing Fire. Same kind of thing, how they use altered states to make massive advances in their consciousness and creativity and everything else. And they talk about everything from meditation and trance, and they talk about hallucinogens and all the different ways, dance, music, that you can get into different states. So it's really cool. Steve, that is good. It is on my list. It's a long list. Because non-fiction always takes longer to read, doesn't it?
It
You know
does,
what I mean? Like fiction, you can just race through it, but non-fiction longer. Good stuff. As always, Steve, where can people find you?
My website, it's quite a long one, but I'll give you the short title. If you go to getluckynow.me, getluckynow.me, that will take you to my website, the full name of which is drstephensimpson.com.
Super stuff. Shall we... So you don't drink... Why did I not know that you don't drink red wine?
Because you never asked me.
Maybe not. Okay. We'll go and have a drink of some description.
Yeah, we'll find something.
Brilliant. Thank you
You've put
very
me
much.
off beer now. You made me feel guilty.
That's all right. Well, you're either gluten-free or you're not, Steve. You can't be both. That is it for the podcast. And that is it from Peterborough Station, where I'm going to wrap this up, and then I'm going to do some more of that walking meditation until my train comes in about 7 minutes' time. Tell you what, it's incredible how I feel like I start to kind of notice the world around me and my own physicality a little bit more when I do that walking meditation. So I'm going to do that a little bit more. If you've enjoyed this podcast, there's plenty more with Dr. Stephen Simpson. If you just kind of scroll back through the archives, you'll find plenty more with Dr. Steve, including one we recorded in Portugal about a year ago. And if you have enjoyed it, maybe you would click the kind of little square on the top right of the screen on iTunes. You can do it on most of the podcast listening apps, and share this podcast with a friend or someone you think might enjoy it, or someone you think could do with a little bit of meditation, and you just want to kind of subtly introduce it to them without being kind of too overt about it. So yeah, if you want to share it with someone, that'd be awesome. Thank you for listening to Zestology, and see you next time.